Who made some progress there? Cool. That wasn't yours that I showed though, right? Who was that? Again, that was Jordan, right? Just two of you. Do not feel bad about that. That was of course very hard to do because it's not a terribly straightforward thing with React. So there are a lot of rich text editor widgets out there, CK editor and stuff like that. Trix, Trix from Basecamp that are basically just drop in. You just drop them in place of a text area, or even just put a class on a text area and add their JavaScript, and it just automatically replaces it with their fancy widget. But when you get into the React world with controlled components and all that stuff, it's a little more complicated. Facebook has a project called Draft.js, draft.js.org, which is a rich text editor framework for React. So it's not something that you use directly. It's something you can use to build your own component for rich text editing. And lots of people, of course, have done that thing because we're not the first people in the world to have this problem, right? So you can find a lot of projects that use Draft.js. I think there might even be a link to them from the README here. Examples, blah, blah, blah. Well, anyway. So the one that I'm going to use in my example is called React-RTE. It's the one that Jordan used. This is a demo of it. And what makes React-RTE a little different from some of them is that you can get HTML in and out of it. Because here's why this is complicated. The way our form works now, we just have an input for the title and a text area for the body. And the contents, the values, are just strings, right? Well, Draft.js is more than a string. It will track such things as where you left the cursor last time you had that particular editor open. Stuff like that, the kinds of things that a word processor would keep track of. And it doesn't do the presentation with HTML either. It has its own layout thing. So if you want to persist that in a database, what you do is you actually turn the state of their component into an object that you can store in a database. You serialize it. You take an object and you turn it into something that can be stored, something string-like that you can store in a database. So, when you go up to Firebase and look at what's stored there, you wouldn't see the text that you entered into the field. You would see some nonsense that you can't make any sense of. So the fact that that's how it works makes it a little complicated. React-RTE, the particular variant of Draft.js that we're using, lets you get HTML in and out of it. So it's rich text, but you can get an HTML representation of that rich text that would work even outside of a React app. You don't have to have that component there to read it later. But in order to get HTML out of this component and reinitialize this component later with that HTML requires a little effort. But this particular component makes it pretty easy as these things go. So as you would expect, of course, you need to add it to your project using either npm install or yarn add, right? React-RTE, RTE for rich text editor. And they give you an example for how to use it. Of course, you need to import it. And then let's look at the actual component down here. Rich text editor has two props, value and onChange, just like ours. The difference is value is not just a string. It's this funny object. So when we want it to be blank, it can't just be an empty string. We have to call this function that they provide called createEmptyValue. Because we know the value isn't just a string, it's some object that we don't understand. So you have to do that to initialize the blank one. And then you'll see what they do on change here. First, notice that the change handler doesn't receive an event. It receives the value as the argument. And that's that special weird object value. So they save that in state because they need something that syncs with the actual component, and that can't be just a string. But you can turn it into a string. They provide a toString function, and if you supply an argument, HTML, then it'll give you a string of HTML from there, and that's what you can store up on app and sync that with Firebase. So that's how you could persist it. But how do you get it back? Because right now, all we know how to set is an empty value. So they have a way to do that that also isn't all that hard, documented down here. If you actually look at the API for this thing, you see value. Initially, you'll probably want to create an instance using a provided helper, such as rich text editor.createEmptyValue or rich text editor create value from string. So if your database has a string, but you want to make a rich text editor value out of it, you pass that string to this method and pass an additional argument telling it that that string is HTML. And it'll turn it into the value that this component understands. So we need to add state to our notes form component to keep in sync with this special rich text editor. And then we just need to make our on change and our value a little different so that they use this type of value and they convert to and from a string. Again, I'll do this at home and push it up to GitHub tomorrow and document it a little bit. And hopefully you can see that by making very small commits and using good commit messages, it's generally kind of easy to follow how we got from one place to another, and by using careful variable names and careful method names and so on. So I'll document it as thoroughly as I think I need to for you to get the picture. But that's a real quick overview of how we can do the rich text editor here. Questions about that at the moment? Okay.